Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a book summary review of Nate Silver's The Signal and the Noise. We're going to unpack exactly why so many of our predictions just fail spectacularly, and more importantly, how we can actually navigate this incredibly data-heavy world we live in. We're constantly bombarded with forecasts, right? The weather, the economy, the next election. But how many of them are actually right? Let's find out. Okay, so let's start with this profound paradox of the information age that Silver sets up right at the beginning of the book. Think about it for a second. We've got supercomputers, endless data streams, algorithms running 24/7. Logically, our foresight into the future should be crystal clear. But instead, we are consistently blindsided. So what exactly is going wrong here? Well, to answer that, we'll be exploring 6 critical areas today: the information age paradox, the danger of absolute certainty, finding the signal, the Bayesian mindset, overcoming our cognitive traps, and finally, embracing intellectual humility. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the information age paradox. You see, having more data doesn't automatically mean we have more truth. We literally have to separate the signal, the actual underlying truth, from the noise. And the noise is essentially everything that distracts us from that truth, like spurious correlations or false confidence. Silver makes this great point in the book: an explosion of data often just leads to what statisticians call overfitting. Basically, we start seeing all these fake correlations and building up false confidence. The noise just totally drowns out the signal. We end up seeing patterns where absolutely none exist, completely distracted by all the static. Which brings us to section 2, the danger of absolute certainty. The 2008 financial crash is honestly a textbook example of what happens when economic models prioritize airtight, beautiful theories over messy reality. Silver argues in his review of the crisis that forecasters were essentially trapped in these ideological bubbles. They built these elegant but incredibly brittle models that just assumed markets would always seek equilibrium and that humans would always behave rationally. Yeah, right. They completely ignored outlier risks, the harsh reality of human panic, herd behavior, and those complex feedback loops. They basically mistook a really neat mathematical model for the incredibly messy real world. So, the absolutely crucial point to take away here is this: confidence is not the same as accuracy. Forecasters simply have to prioritize uncertainty and flexibility. Clinging to this illusion of absolute certainty, that is exactly what blindsides us when the unexpected inevitably happens. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Section 3, finding the signal. Take earthquake prediction, for example. Despite decades of intense research, the Earth's crust just behaves in completely nonlinear, chaotic ways. Accurate forecasting is basically impossible right now. But because the public demands certainty, it opens the door wide from misleading proclamations and, frankly, pseudoscience. Now flip that and compare it to meteorology. Weather forecasters, who used to be the punchline of every joke, are incredibly successful today. Why? Well, because they use probabilistic models. They run ensemble simulations and constantly update their forecasts based on real-time data coming in. And most importantly, they are completely transparent about their uncertainty. They talk in likelihoods, like there's a 30% chance of rain, rather than absolute guarantees. Let's look at another massive success story. In baseball, the use of data, often called sabermetrics, completely revolutionized the entire sport. It was a real game changer because it actively challenged outdated, long-held assumptions. Teams were actually willing to question their basic gut intuition. But it also worked so well because the environment itself was just perfect for it. The goals were clear and measurable, basically winning games, and the feedback loops were incredibly tight and frequent. You know very quickly if a strategy on the baseball field is working or if it's a total flop. So how do we apply this? That brings us to section 4, the Bayesian mindset. Nate Silver's ultimate solution in the book relies heavily on Bayes' theorem. It's this centuries-old mathematical formula that he essentially uses as a core life philosophy. It boils down to 3 steps. Step 1, form a provisional hypothesis. Notice I said provisional, not a permanent fact, just an initial guess. Step 2, aggressively incorporate fresh incoming data. And step 3, update your evolving belief. This entire framework teaches us to treat predictions not as static, one-time guesses that we have to defend to the death, but as living, breathing, evolving hypotheses. Drawing on his own background as a professional player, Silver uses poker as literally the perfect metaphor for life itself. Think about it. At the poker table, you never have all the cards. The most successful players are the ones who can read behavior, weigh the risks, and adjust their strategy incredibly quickly based purely on probabilities and partial clues. They aren't paralyzed by indecision, and they definitely don't fold just because they lack perfect information. They play the odds. Now, adopting this mindset is tough, which leads to Section 5, overcoming our cognitive traps. We all fall into cognitive traps every single day. Our brains are just wired this way. First up is confirmation bias. That's our tendency to just cherry pick evidence that supports what we already believe. The fix for that? Disciplined skepticism. Next is our addiction to narrative. Human beings love a good story, so much so that we will actively ignore hard statistics if a compelling, juicy story contradicts them. The fix here is radical openness. And finally, the illusion of certainty, being wildly overconfident in our own gut intuitions. To counteract this one, we absolutely need rigorous self-reflection. And hey, please do not just rely on technology to save you from these traps. Algorithms are not a magic panacea. The massive rise of big data means more variables, which means exponentially more chances to find entirely meaningless patterns. In his summary, Silver strongly urges us to resist the lure of complexity just for complexity's sake. Intricate, black box systems that no one can actually interpret, they often perform so much worse than simpler models built on very clear, testable assumptions. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, embracing intellectual humility. Here, Silver applies his whole framework to three massive, real-world areas. First, political polling. His famous 538 model treats polls not as absolute prophecies, but just as snapshots. Snapshots that often get wildly distorted by the media's simplistic, binary horse race framing. Second is climate change. While daily weather is, incredibly noisy and unpredictable, the long-term signal of climate change is remarkably robust and detectable. We just have to understand the different scales of time. And third, pandemics like COVID-19, where early models suffered heavily from missing data and a lot of overconfidence. The big overarching lesson across all three of these domains is super clear. We must communicate in ranges of risk, never in false, rigid certainties. Ultimately, getting better at prediction means shifting our entire culture. It's really not just about mathematical skill. It's about deep intellectual humility. The very best forecasters out there are curious tinkerers. They aren't dogmatists. They let go of their ideology and they recognize that uncertainty is just a feature of the universe, not a flaw in the system. And honestly, getting better at all this requires being wrong a lot, and more importantly, being totally willing to learn from it. So I'm going to leave you with this final, incredibly important thought. To successfully navigate the endless sea of data around us, we have got to replace our psychological need for absolute certainty with analytical courage. Are you willing to be wrong today to make a better prediction tomorrow? Keep exploring, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.